Good evening, everybody. Could you just let me know if you can see and hear everything okay? That would be absolutely fantastic. I can see there's a few of you already in the chat, so I'm going to say a couple of hellos once I know that everything is working. And then we'll kind of quickly go through what are going to be in tonight's live stream. So first of all, let me just say that I'm not in my usual location, as you can probably tell by the background. I'm in my temporary office space in the house, waiting for the new studio to be finished, hopefully in a couple of weeks' time, and then I can kind of get out there and do these things properly and get the live streams back up on a regular basis. So please excuse the chaos and the mess in the background. There's just stuff everywhere at the moment. Okay, so thank you very much. See that everything is looking good. Thank you very much, Kyle. Thank you very much, Charlie. So who do we have in to start off with? So first of all, let's just say a couple of hellos. Kyle, always great to see you. Good to see you in here tonight. And Charlie Bird, Stratus Tutorials, good to see you in. Great to see you back here. And Heinrich, good evening. Saeed, good to see you as well. And Simon, always great to see you all here. As always, let me know where you're from. And if this is your first time on the live stream, just make sure you put hashtag new in the comments so we can kind of take a look and say hello to all the new people that are in tonight. Okay, so I'm pretty sure you all know who my guest is tonight and the reasons why we're going to be doing this. But if not, I'm just going to quickly go over who Dave is and why he's joining me tonight and why we're doing this live stream. Now, Dave Foy, if you don't know, has always been a really good online educator when it comes to things like dealing with Elementor, with WordPress and so on. But recently he's moved over and started taking a look at educating people on how to get started using Webflow. He's recently released a course on transitioning from WordPress to Webflow to get you up to speed with exactly how to start working with this incredibly online powerful tool. So tonight we're just going to have a chat about Webflow, WordPress, why Dave changed over, and a few other things. And as always, if you've got any comments or questions for Dave or myself, make sure you put those in the chat section down below so we can take a look at those and we can get involved in this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to say good evening to Mr. Foy and get him involved in tonight's stream. So good evening, Dave. How are we doing, young man?
Good evening. I'm all right, thank you, Paul. And thank you for having me once again. I think we've done this once before, actually, haven't we?
We have indeed. We have indeed. It's always a pleasure to have you on anyway, you know.
Yeah, no, thank you very, very much. We've been talking for a few months, haven't we now, about we must get together and have a chat and a bit of a catch up. So where better than live on your YouTube channel? Yeah. Come on, let's go big. Go big exactly. Or go home.
You need to have a home first, though, Dave, and you're still building yours.
Yes, I am actually. Yeah, Paul and I have just been having a big conversation about our various building projects. So, yeah, I probably win on the hassle and inconvenience front at the moment. But
yeah. I think it all scales proportionally, though, doesn't it? I mean, I just converted a garage. You're building an entire house, so.
Yeah, and actually, though, exactly like your project, because we are building a completely brand new house in a completely different city to the one that I currently live in. But actually, the original aim is exactly the same, because I wanted a nicer studio, and I just thought, well, let's build a new house. But let's build the entire thing around the needs of my studio. So when we started talking to like architects and things like that, and they were saying, well, you know, what are your goals? My goal was studio. Oh, I want all these different things. I want all these ports and all these points, and I need it to be away from this part of the house, and I need it to be acoustically treated. And at some point, the missus kind of chipped in. She was like, "Do you think we should talk about the kitchen?"
Crazy.
Nah, the kitchen details.
Yeah, exactly.
Kitchen, we'll move on to kitchens later.
We know there's going to be a kitchen. It's just a case of what color the cabinets are going to be.
Exactly.
What more do we need?
Details.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's all good fun.
It's all good fun. We need to know HDMI points, where they're going to be, the networking, and how good is the Wi-Fi going to be inside that room. That's the only thing that matters in a complete house build. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I think I've got 100 ports. Sockets and USB ports and Ethernet points and everything. Yeah, it's like the whole walls are just like this kind of series of holes to plug stuff into.
And the thing is, you guarantee that Apple will turn around and change the proprietary connection.
Yeah,
they will be useless to you.
Of course. Yeah, it's all part of the fun. Let's build again. We'll build somewhere else.
Exactly. So a couple of people have sort of popped up and said that Dave is really loud and I'm really quiet. So I've adjusted the level. So could you let me know if that's a little bit more balanced for you? If Dave's levels are kind of more on par with my levels, let me know in the comments. That would be absolutely fantastic.
I can talk a bit quieter as well.
That's okay. I can talk louder. It's no problem.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay. So, don't go there, Kyle. Kyle's lowering the tone already. He's already talked about diarrhea and now he's talking about other things. So if Kyle keeps on going, we're going to ban him from the chat. That's all I'm going to say.
What a surprise.
Exactly. Dodgy geezer.
Ban hammer. Boom.
Exactly. So let's just take a couple of minutes now. I'm going to hand things over to you, Dave, where you can just introduce yourself, have a little sort of chat about what we're going to be covering tonight, the different things you want to talk about, why you've moved over to WordPress and so on, very briefly, and then we'll kind of go into those in a bit more detail as we go through this evening's live stream. So I'm going to hand the camera over to you and give you full screen.
Brilliant. Take over. I like the idea. I like the sound of this. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Dave. I started my online teaching journey back in 2017, teaching WordPress and Elementor primarily as my kind of combo of tools. I chose those tools partly because I was using them myself anyway, my own business. I'd seen how certainly page builders like Elementor empowered people, not like me actually, because I am a hand coder by trade, go way back, but empowered people who didn't know how to code, but wanted to be able to build websites and landing pages and things really quickly, and didn't want to have to wait for people like me who were the bottleneck. So a designer that I worked with, for instance, would create a brilliant landing page. The guy who was responsible for the marketing wanted to get that landing page out there straight away, wanted to start sending like Facebook ads to that page. And I would say, yeah, sure, give me, 2 weeks. I'll create the page for you. I'll put it in the queue. So the emergence of page builders was just incredible. It freed up and democratized web building and web design for so many people, which I am all for, definitely. So when I decided that I was going to teach these tools online and help people, more and more people, more and more non-coders, the combination of WordPress and Elementor to me was just the answer, just the perfect combination of tools. And I was delighted with that combination myself for a good 3.5 years. Now, over the course of my teaching, however many thousand students now across my courses at the time, gradually there started to be issues cropped up. It's the same issues that I was finding as well. Issues related to things like constant plugin updates, issues related to stuff breaking because of those plugin updates. Elementor themselves had a series of, well, quite frankly, buggy updates for quite some time. But also just issues with the fact that for some people, what makes WordPress the ideal platform for them is the fact that there are millions of, not quite millions, but tens or hundreds of thousands of plugins for every possible occasion. That is obviously one of the pros. The downside that you get with that particular model and that particular architecture, the plugin architecture, is that there are hundreds of thousands of plugins that need maintaining, need constant updates, need keeping on top of, and I particularly for me, it's like I guess the straw that broke the camel's back at some point was when I'd got to the point. I mean, I'd heard from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students who were just pissed off basically with Elementor breaking, with various things in WordPress breaking, with constantly having to keep these things up to date. So I'd heard it again and again and again myself, but also I had some projects of my own as well, and I came to set them up, came to start the project, and found that Elementor's latest release again had some bugs in it, which meant that I couldn't get going. So there were quite a lot of those issues around, and I started to think, 4 years ago, I highly recommended this particular combination of tools to non-coders who just wanted to build websites, right? So I'm not talking about really technical people. I'm not talking about people who love fiddling with tech. I'm not talking about people who, and there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Some people just love fiddling with tech. That is their thing. You know, the fact, I think sometimes for some people, the fact that stuff needs setting up, it needs configuring, it may break. The fact that they get the chance to go in and fix it and get that dopamine hit of having achieved something. Some people love that, and that is like, I'm not judging, you know, that is amazing. But certainly for me, who I suppose I think like a business, I just want to create websites quickly, efficiently, move on. I don't want to be logging into WordPress and thinking, oh God, what is going to greet me? Which plugins are going to need updating now? You know, what problems are there going to be today? I wanted to be able to build websites just quickly and easily without any hassle. And I know that if people ask me, you know, what would you recommend that I use? I started to think, would I recommend this particular combo? And my answer started to become more and more, I don't think I would. Now, also bear in mind, and I do not say this to brag, but by this point, I'd built up a multiple six-figure-a-year business, selling courses, teaching this particular platform, teaching WordPress and Elementor. So my need to start looking elsewhere was quite a big deal, really. You know, because I had, let's say, quite a vested interest in recommending these particular tools and teaching these particular tools. So it was not something lightly, and I would never switch tools. I would never, you know, if I've got a workflow going with a particular set of tools, I would never recommend that people switch lightly. Switching is expensive in terms of your time and energy and money, learning new things. So for me, it was a massive, massive, massive deal to get to that point of even thinking about using something else, let alone teaching it to other people. So that was the point that I got to, I suppose, by the end of probably around this time last year, actually. I'd got to the point of thinking, there's got to be a better way. Somehow, there's got to be something. Now, I'd actually heard about Webflow a few times from a few people already, and not just a few times, lots of times, from people that I actually trust. You know, I really trust and really value their opinion, who were saying to me, have you heard about Webflow? It's amazing. We've switched everything over to Webflow. And I honestly just ignored pretty much all of those people, partly because why on earth would I want to look at another platform? You know, what I've got going on is working well for me. Why would I want to do that? Also, pretty much also the vested interest thing. It's like, hang on, I'm doing really well financially from a business perspective, teaching a particular set of tools and recommending highly, you know, personally highly recommending those tools. I would never teach and recommend something that I didn't personally think were the right tools for the job. So yeah, it was reluctantly that I actually tried Webflow, and I mean, Paul and I can, you know, we can talk about this more, but Webflow is a completely different proposition to WordPress in that WordPress is open source with millions of plugins and that you can use and adapt and change. And Webflow is a closed platform. It really isn't open source at all. So it was quite strange to even think about making such a dramatic shift. Now I gave Webflow a try and immediately reversed. Oh, no, this looks complicated. So I just thought nothing more of it. Then came back to some more issues again with my setup and with WordPress. I can't remember the exact details, but it was like, oh, here we go again. Gave it another go. I think I did that 3 times. I gave Webflow a go 3 times and eventually got my head around it. And when I got my head around it, and specifically some very specific benefits of the platform were things that, it's just like my eyes were opened. I thought, this is the answer. This is the answer to so many issues that I and my students that I've been hearing from, complaints from over and over and over again. I actually thought this really is the answer. So I kind of embraced it. As Kyle says, yeah, apples and elephants. He's comparing 2 completely separate approaches, totally. So, but yeah, for me, for my own particular needs and the way that I kind of want to approach my business and profitability and all that kind of thing, yeah, Webflow just really, really clicked with me. Lots and lots of issues still I had in the early days, which meant that, well, we can talk about like the issues that I had and the problems and stuff. But yeah, bringing us kind of up to date so far. That's where we are.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's like the benefits and the strengths of the ecosystem for WordPress is that it has over 50,000 plugins available, tens of thousands of themes. And that flexibility is what generally sort of appeals to so many people, is that they can do pretty much whatever they want, whenever they want to. But the downside of that is there's an awful lot to maintain to keep those things running and talking to each other without having issues. And I think that's, if you like that or you become used to that, which I think many of us that use WordPress on a daily basis, they used to log in and seeing 20 updates and thinking, oh crap, what the hell's going to go wrong this time? And then when you look at something like Webflow, where all of the updates are done behind the scenes, the hosting is there, all those kinds of things, I think a lot of people get defensive about the whole WordPress ecosystem when you talk about things like Webflow, because they may feel that freedom that they have with WordPress kind of gets taken away a little bit when you move over. And I think some people generally look at platforms like this and compare it to the likes of Wix and Squarespace and so on. And yes, I suppose you could say something like Webflow is like a hybrid between your traditional Wix Webflow type setup and WordPress. It's that sort of halfway house where you have more flexibility of design, more flexibility over what you want to achieve, but you still have the perceptible ease of use in a lot of use cases, but you don't have all that hassle of dealing with the updates and the hosting and all the different component pieces that a WordPress website kind of has going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. It takes me back a little bit actually to my pre-WordPress days, because I've been using WordPress since 2007, I think. So a fair amount of time. Before that, when I'd first started coding and first started making websites and clients started coming to me effectively asking for a CMS of some kind, I used a few different systems. This was all definitely pre-WordPress, pre-WordPress even being a thing. But the first system that I really got into was called Expression Engine, which Expression Engine was amazing. Expression Engine required you to know how to code the templates, right? You needed to know HTML, you needed to know CSS. So for non-coders today, Expression Engine would have been a non-starter, right? Completely. So, but what I knew nothing else. But what Expression Engine allowed me to do as a developer is create exactly the system that my clients needed.
Yeah.
So let's say my client needed a news section, an event section, a section for their services, maybe some kind of booking thing. I don't know, whatever it is. I could create the exact templates they needed and nothing more. I didn't have to hack anything to make a system that was supposed to do one thing actually do something else. I could, for every single one of those content management scenarios that they needed, like, I don't know, whatever the different sections of the site and things, I could create the exact custom fields, the exact like layouts of those custom fields. Like everything was just completely, I would build that from scratch. I actually didn't need to be a database developer. I didn't need to know PHP. I didn't need to know any. I was actually a front end developer, basically creating nice looking designs with HTML and CSS. So, but I must say, when I first discovered WordPress, which was the reason I discovered WordPress was because at the time I needed for a particular project a really simple blogging solution. That's it. And so WordPress as a simple blogging solution actually works pretty fine. There's a posts section where I can add posts. There's a pages section that I can add pages, which was fine to a point. But I tended to find that very quickly, and bear in mind, I'd already used 6 different kind of CMS systems before this, right? Missing my Dreamweaver, and yeah, going way back to all those days. I actually found WordPress to be a bit of a hack, right? Now, I'm not saying that to be down on WordPress, and I am not down on WordPress, right? This is, well, I hope it's clear that that's not what this call is about. But I must say, I always found it to be a bit of a hack of essentially a blogging tool to create this multifaceted, dynamic, complex, CMS-driven website kind of thing.
Yeah.
With having to kind of bolt on all kinds of different plugins from different developers who have different approaches and different ways of managing. Even with Elementor, the fact that it's like, oh God, I've got to go and where do I set that particular setting, those particular styles? I'm going to call in another plugin, which is now going to impose a different way of doing this on me. So for me, it was always felt a little bit hacky in that sense, and still does in a way. And I think I've always found that people who have never known anything else, and this is going to sound really patronizing, right? So I apologize up front. It's not meant to. But I think people who have known nothing else but WordPress and page builders, and as I said at the beginning, what an awesome combination to allow anybody to, to build websites. I am all for it. But I think if you've not seen anything else, you probably don't realize like some of this is really crazy. Some of the stuff, the hoops you've got to jump through to make this system like appealing to clients, for instance.
Yeah.
The stuff you've got to hide, the stuff you've got to tell them, oh, just don't look at that or just ignore that or whatever, It's just odd, I think. Just really, really odd. And I think it was partly, it was a lot of all those swirling issues that made me think for some situations there is probably a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Now, all platforms, I say this a lot at the moment, but all platforms have trade-offs.
Yeah.
Don't they? Everything. I mean, we're not just talking web design platforms. You could pick any software. You could pick any hardware. We talk about monitors and keyboards and, I don't know, lights and cars and TVs. And I mean, literally, you just pick any product that somebody creates. And they've had to kind of carefully choose trade-offs because you cannot have everything. And like, I think a lot of your choice of platform to do with web design for certain kinds of projects. And so, I mean, this is another point to come to, which let's return to in a little bit. But I think it's all about trade-offs. So like, for instance, with WordPress, yes, you have access to tens or hundreds of thousands of plugins, which is incredible. It gives you the ability to have a fair degree of control over lots and lots of different aspects of the process. It kind of gives you at least a feeling that you own the tools that you're using and the products you're using, especially if they are open source. So all of that are massive pros. If we're talking about advantages, Like WordPress has got a massive amount going for it. Now, the trade-off with all of that is there's a lot of setup, there's a lot of configuration, there's a lot of hassle in terms of tech setup and combining these tools and combining all these multitude of different plugins to actually get the job done.
Yep.
There's the fact of the time and the expense and the headache and the stress and the hassle of updating those plugins and maintaining those plugins and fixing issues caused by those plugins. So it's a case of trade-offs. It's like, what are you going to do? Yeah, you've got to, for many people, the advantages that I just listed are more than acceptable.
Yeah.
Sorry, the disadvantages, I suppose.
Yeah.
The disadvantages I've just listed are more than acceptable for those advantages that they get from that. So people might say, I am happy to deal with all of the potential disadvantages. That's fine. It's no problem at all. I just accept that is the cost of doing business, the cost of building websites, because of all these advantages that I get. Now, I suppose what a tool like Webflow is doing, or not just Webflow, but third-party like hosted platforms that have built something for you. So, I mean, let's take my online courses. Like, I don't build them, I don't host them on WordPress. I actually decided, because of the trade-offs, to just use a hosted platform like Thinkific instead.
Yeah.
Because for me, my time is worth more than fiddling about with all of the plugins and the mess of setting up a WordPress LMS and the performance issues and the requirements for the extra requirements for hosting. I'll just pay somebody probably the same amount of money overall after you've finished messing about with all your licenses and your hosting and everything else and your video hosting. Yeah. I'll just pay Thinkific every month for that. So for me, that's the trade-off. And it's the same with things like Webflow. It's like, yeah, you don't have complete control over every single aspect of the process. Yeah, there might be some functionality cases that you've got to, I don't know, just you can't do in Webflow. So you've got to use a third-party service and put it together with Zapier or something like that. Or, but for me, I just found that the trade-off of those potential issues for me are more than outweighed by the fact that I can log in. I don't like worry when I log into Webflow. It's like, oh God, what am I going to be faced with? I can just get on with building everything is all in one place because it's created by one developer. So it's a unified UI and a unified experience. It's so quick and so easy to use. It's rock solid. Nothing has ever broken, ever. And I've got completely true kind of global control over every single style and every aspect of the layout that I could possibly need for basically around the same price that I was actually paying for all the various aspects of using WordPress anyway.
Yeah.
But for those downsides. But I think as long as you're aware of the natural trade-offs that are inherent in any platform, and I think also as well to say just that it's not. You alluded to this, Paul, earlier, but it's not a case of either or. No. It's not like a versus battle, some sort of fight.
And I think that's the thing is that you do have to choose the right tools for the job. And I think, unfortunately, when it comes to things like page builders and platforms that we use, there's a certain sense of tribalism. I've put my time and effort and money into this particular thing, and I'm going to defend this to the hilt. Is it the right one for a particular situation? It could be, but it could also not be. At which point, going back to what you were saying about WordPress feeling like a bit of a hacks scenario, I really didn't like WordPress when I first took a look at it, probably like version 3, something like that. I found it really limited. Sort of everything you wanted to do was problematic, and it really wasn't intended to be anything other than a blogging platform. that's only really developed because so many third-party companies have come along and created extensions and add-ons and different things to push it beyond what it was ever intended to do. It's like trying to take a bicycle and convert it into a bus. Yes, they both get you from A to B, but they're not intended to take 30 or 40 people with you. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, we kind of look at WordPress as being a content management system, but the reality is the content it was meant to manage was blog posts and information like that. It was never really intended to be anything bigger than that, only because the third parties have come on board, and then page builders came about, Visual Composer, those kinds of things made it easier, and more people started coming on board, creating websites using those tools. They've become developed and expanded, and now we have tools like Oxygen and Elementor and things like that. But as solid as a tool like WordPress is in various different ways, it's still not necessarily the right tool. And the same goes for Webflow. Like we're talking tonight, it's not a case of we're trying to say you shouldn't be using this, you should use this, or this is wrong, or that's wrong. I've preached for a long time. Excuse my phone going now. It's going to be a spam call. I've preached for a long time.
Unprofessional.
I know, tell me about it. It's the one thing I forgot to unplug. So you can guarantee that this is going to put me off now. I completely lost my train of thought. So I'm just going to mute the microphone and just hand you back over to Dave. So back over to...
It's me calling you, actually.
All right. I do apologise. I'm not actually in.
Answer the phone, Paul. Come on.
No, I'm not going to answer the phone. Yeah, I feel totally unprofessional. I feel unprepared in everything. So I'm going to go and hide myself in shame in a moment.
Let's keep going.
But I do think that, WordPress is as good as it is for various different things. It's not necessarily the only platform or the right platform. And like I just said, I think the same goes for Webflow. Webflow has limitations. As long as the project that you're working on can work and sit inside those limitations, it might be the perfect platform for it. And to go back to another point that you kind of raised or touched upon, which is the cost of using platforms like Thinkific, using like WordPress and Webflow and things like that. People always go, oh, but WordPress is free. But WordPress isn't free. The platform itself, yes, is free, but you need to host it somewhere. And if you want a decent site to, actually be available to more than 3 people, consecutively, you need decent quality hosting. So there's a cost. You want an SSL certificate? Yes, a lot of the time they're included now for free. But if you do an e-commerce, it has a cost because you want to cover yourself for higher, insurance rate kind of thing. So all those things, once you start to mount this up, and licenses and all the different things that go with it, all of those things have costs involved. So when you do an apples to elephants comparison, to use Kyle's analogy, you can't really draw a parallel between WordPress being free and Webflow being expensive, because WordPress itself is not all you need to have a website. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree entirely. I am not... let's think how to phrase this. I am always happy to invest in my business and tools. So if investing in a particular tool saves me time, makes me money, saves me money, increases my quality of life, then I'll see it as an investment, because there will be hopefully some return on that investment. So when I first looked into Webflow, I actually thought to myself, all right, well, I've got to pay for this tool, but I am probably playing over the odds in order to have a stress-free, hassle-free experience where everything is done for me. The tool, the hosting, all the page speed, the SEO stuff, everything's kind of all included. When I actually looked into it, and you've got to be careful about what you're comparing, but when I looked into it, it actually turned out to be at least the same price, if not sometimes a little bit cheaper than using WordPress. Now, I'm not going to factor in time into this, but I should, because your time is worth something. Time is money. But I'm not gonna kind of factor in that the amount of time that you save on maintenance and all the stuff to fixing things and everything else. But you pay, I don't know, it's like $24 a month for an account plan with Webflow, which gives you the account plan is basically the ability to use Webflow. So it gives you access to the builder. You can create new projects. You can stage those projects on a webflow.io subdomain. So you've got like $24 a month blanket cost to be able to do that. Now, in terms of using WordPress and, over the kind of the lifetime of projects and maybe over the lifetime of 10 or 20 projects, you have got the price of all of the different licenses. You've got like, your regular sort of page builder license and theme licenses and licenses to use all kinds of different plugins and functionality. You would also have the fee from your hosting in the first place for staging. So you need to pay somewhere for actually staging these sites in the first place, which you get with the account plan. So all of that stuff is kind of taken care of inside that anyway, which to me, $24 a month, if you pay monthly. I think it's $16 a month if you pay for the full year, which is obviously cheaper. And then, so you can be building and staging those sites as and when you want. Then when you're ready to go live with a site, or when you want to point a live domain at any of your projects, you have to then add a site plan to that project, right? So account plan is a single event, a single account plan that you have, which covers you for building and staging. And then for each live site, you would then buy a site plan and assign it to that project. So the site plans are $20 a month, I think, if you pay a month. I forget offhand, but something like that anyway. Now, so you can see that site plan account is like equal or equivalent to a hosting. So that's actually buying live hosting for those sites. Now, compared to a managed host, so to try and compare apples with apples, or at least apples with oranges, I'm comparing that cost for hosting with Webflow to the cost of a quality managed WordPress host like Kinsta, for example, who charge around that. I think it's about $20 a month for a Kinsta as well. So that's equivalent. Now, if you can obviously host WordPress websites far cheaper than that, but again, it's a trade-off. You've got all the setup and the maintenance and possible hassle and everything else, which, if that works for you, is of course absolutely fine. I must keep stressing that, but yeah, once you kind of add that up, and also the fact that with Webflow, in terms of all of those costs, you got the fact that everything is done for you in terms of setup. I just go into my panel, new project, give it a name, boom, it's ready. Everything's all in place. Literally, it takes about 20 seconds or less to create a new project, and the hosting and the staging, everything is just all done. But also included in that are all the things that you would need. So you don't need a page builder, you don't need any kind of like SEO plugins, you don't need to worry at all about page speed and caching and all that kind of stuff, because that's all included as well. So I think that, again, as long as you're comparing like with like, it's actually not a bad deal at all, really. And it's a cost. It's certainly a cost that I'm really happy to pay. It's more than worth it for me. Now, I'm not building sites for clients and marking that up for clients, but if you should be charging clients a markup of way more than that anyway. So if that isn't a return on investment for you, then you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point.
Yeah.
So let's take a little look at some of the questions that are actually coming in. You have to excuse me, my trackpad's decided that the battery's going to be down to 2%. The phone's going to go off. It's going to be one of those things that no matter how much I'm plugging it in, and it's just going, oh, you don't have a trackpad.
Borrow mine if you like.
Oh, cheers. Can you just pass that through the screen?
There you go.
Yeah. Hang on. Yeah, it's not connecting to my one either. 2%. Bloody Apple. Yeah, so let's take a look at some of the questions, if I can get my trackpad to actually show up. Right, connected. Do you ever get the feeling like today's going to be one of those days? Right, I did star a couple of these questions now. Okay, I do like this one. It's not a question; it's just a statement, and I kind of think that is it sums up WordPress quite well. WordPress is like an enchanted magical forest with a swamp bang in the middle of it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I like that one. That's very true.
Covers it.
Yeah. So let's have a little look. So this is from Sasa. WP is much better when it comes to development. Would you agree with that, or would you say that, after using the two of these for quite some time now, how would you compare them development for development, shall we say?
It depends on what you mean. I mean, if you are developing, development is a very broad term. So if you're developing WordPress sites in terms of the fact that you're actually coding the templates and the theme and everything else, then yeah, you actually have complete control as far as WordPress's architecture goes. Anyway, you've got complete control. Now, even if you're using a page builder, I don't know. I mean, it depends. With Webflow's, Webflow's might seem like it's some kind of like, I don't know, slightly enhanced version of Wix or something like that. I mean, it's nothing further from the truth. As a kind of an ex-hand coder myself, I suppose, it is extremely powerful. I can build. I've tried to think about, I suppose, some more kind of like advanced like booking solutions, possibly some kind of advanced events management type stuff. No, probably you would be better off using a completely different tool, either a dedicated, separate third-party tool or building it with WordPress plugins. So there are certain things that, yeah, in terms of development, I would say you would be better off with WordPress, definitely. But in terms of, I mean, Webflow's ability for you to have like complete control over like every aspect of every element you add to the page, the styling and the classes and the CSS of every single element you add to the page, and global maintenance of all of that, and the CMS, which gives you all the kind of custom fields, custom, I suppose Webflow don't call them custom post types, but actual post types that you want to create of any description, and the conditional stuff, the sorting and filtering is amazing. And it's I've struggled to think of certainly many kinds of sites, like listing sites and things like that, that Webflow wouldn't be able to handle. So I mean, it just depends. I suppose the thing is, it just depends on what you're trying to develop.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, like you say, you kind of talk about listing websites and that, but then I wouldn't consider Webflow to be something that was kind of geared towards those types of sites in development anyway. To me, they're more business sites, personal sites, those kinds of things. I think when you look at a listing site, that's quite a specialist type of website to be building for anyone. I mean, WordPress generally isn't really intended to do that. It's just with the advent of things like Metabox and ACF and so on, they make adding your own custom post types, custom meta fields, those kinds of things, very, very easy to do. But again, that kind of goes back to your whole sort of thing about it's kind of feels very hacked together.
It does, and actually Webflow this is one thing that actually surprised me, because I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting there to be a lot of limitations in that regard because of custom post types, custom fields, and then all the various tools that you can use for conditional logic and filtering and sorting and all those kind of things. And I was actually surprised that without any plugins, you can create all of the custom post types and all of the custom fields you need, and have like total control over how all of that data is output onto the site, including, I don't know, I'm thinking of things like, you might have multiple post templates in WordPress depending on certain conditions. Yeah. Certain conditions, if it's a certain category or a certain tag, or if a certain kind of data is in one of the custom fields, I don't know, then use a different template for that purpose. I don't know. All of that is just completely possible out of the box without having to bend over backwards and do anything or install anything else. So it's actually surprising the complexity of site that you could develop. If you wanted to get into things like also providing, so like on the subject of listing sites, for instance, so building it in the back end, I think would just be no problem. Where the stepping outside of what Webflow is intended for might come with front end submissions, for example, and people having user accounts and things like that. Now, user accounts and membership functionality is coming to Webflow roundabout now. Actually, I'm surprised they've not announced it already, which is missing at the moment. And if you wanted to have that front end form set up, you use Webflow's forms, which is fine, but you'd probably have to use the third party. You'd probably have to use Zapier to connect that, so the forms submit via Zapier to the CMS, to the relevant collections, they call them in Webflow, rather than post types. But surprising, actually.
But then you're kind of getting into the whole thing you have then with WordPress, where you're kind of hacking various different things together to get them to talk to each other. So, but this kind of leads me on where we talk about the different kinds of websites that you could create. To how do you feel how possible do you think it would be to create a business around something like Webflow as the platform, the backbone for your business, like a lot of people do now with freelancing, with small agencies and things? Creating websites with WordPress. Do you think it's a viable platform to be able to do that and to make a good living, not only developing, but those residual income coming in from the platform itself? Do you think that Webflow is kind of viable for that?
I do, definitely. This touches on the whole care plans issue as well, because I know that a lot of WordPress developers rely on recurring revenue from care plans, which I've discussed a few times actually recently with people. The whole thing about actually building a viable business on Webflow is really interesting. First, I would say let's just go back to the absolute basics. With Webflow, you have a platform where lots and lots and lots of the underlying tech setup and configuration and headaches are done for you. Going back to trade-offs, whether that works for you personally or not, of course, is entirely up to you in your situation. That, the very words of everything is done for you and the configuration is set up might make you kind of run to the hills. No, I need complete control, which is fine. But as somebody who would want to just build a business with using a platform like people do with Shopify, for example, e-commerce, hundreds of thousands of Shopify specialist agencies that build e-commerce sites on nothing but Shopify, for example. Now, the reason that they do that is because they have a stable platform that just works. An incredible amount of the underlying architecture specifically designed for e-commerce, might I add, which kind of is a dig at WordPress, I'll admit. But they've built extremely profitable. I've got a friend who has such a business here in Hull, actually, and they focus completely on actually high-end Shopify websites. They've identified that platform lets them get that done. I know, for instance, several people who develop and build educational courses, LMSs, educational kind of memberships for coaches and educators, built entirely on Thinkific as the platform, right? So, and the beauty of something similar with Webflow is that it's a load of hassle and time and stress and uncertainty done for you so that you can get on with the process of just building websites. That's it. Now, it might be that with the inherent limitations of Webflow, in the sense that you don't control the platform, it might be that if you had that business model, there might be certain types of websites that you'd have to turn away. But I think that it's a really good thing for a web design agency anyway to specialize in doing something really well for certain kinds of people. And I know this from bitter experience, because before I started teaching online, my friend and I, very good friend, we're still very good friends, we kind of partnered up in a web agency, and he was very keen on taking on any project that came in. Like literally anything that came in, we can do it. Right. So we ended up doing like little marketing kind of websites, you know, with like a landing page and a couple of little supporting bits and bobs, like a video. The next day we'd be building some complex e-commerce thing with WooCommerce. You just wouldn't believe the broad range of different things that we had to essentially reinvent the wheel every single time. Now, it was around that time, and this is quite fortuitous, my headphone cable doesn't stretch far enough, so hang on one sec. My headphone's back on. Around that time, I've not planted the book here for this purpose, but it was around the time that I started reading this book, 2015, which was all about simplifying, getting down to the essential. Because if you're trying, like this diagram here suggests, to do everything for everyone, then you're essentially, it's as a business, it's completely inefficient to be doing that. And what Greg McKeown talks about in this book, this is a book that changed my life. It is no joke, and it is not. Anyway, but he's saying that if you kind of doing one thing like really, really well, you're going to be making maximum progress, which is just like a long-winded way of saying that what it would have been better for us to do is pick one type of website. Okay, so I mean the whole discussion about niching down and the benefits of niching down has been well covered, so I don't really need to go into it. But if we'd have picked, for instance, we're going to do Shopify websites for certain kinds of customers really well, right? Now we've got a process. We've got a process for onboarding those clients. We know exactly what we can do for them. We can pre-build components for them. We're not going to be wasting time researching and figuring out how to build like really complex solutions for people. So we would just, send those people to somebody else who was just more appropriate for. So I think actually building a business on a platform like Webflow, where everything's done for you, click a button, boom, there's your project. You can quickly duplicate an existing project. I have a framework which I've pre-built, which has got all of my like styles and a typography system and a layout system and pre-built components, like all ready to go, which I just literally duplicate, boom, it's there, it's ready. I can just get on with it. Also, the fact that Webflow makes true global styling possible. Because one of the bugbears that I had with Elementor, and I'm not picking on Elementor, it goes for pretty much most page builders, probably apart from Oxygen, who copied Webflow, I think, in the first place. It is, although I don't think particularly well. I've tried using Oxygen after I use Webflow, and I can't say I'm keen particularly. I think it's clunky compared to Webflow, really. But one thing that I absolutely loved about Webflow is that, unlike page builders, where they might give you global style settings, global styles for your H1s, your H2s, your H3s, your buttons, your whatever else, anything you like, global colors, standard colors, accent colors, everything else, you're still limited by the options they give you. And you're still constantly having to be going out of your workflow into the global panel, fiddling around with the settings, saving that, going back, click, back to where you were. Webflow does away with all of that completely. So you just get to decide on your own styling conventions, your own naming conventions. If you've got like a little pre-header that you want it to be a certain font, you want it to be bold, you want it to be a certain size, and you want to use that across the site, then you can just immediately just create a class for it, set the styles for it, and boom, you've just created yourself a global style for something that would not be covered in a system which enforces the global style settings on you. So what I'm trying to get at is that in terms of a business which is built on building websites extremely quickly and having global maintenance, just like, I don't know, it's just incredibly easy. And being able to future maintain those sites really easily as well. Like, even with really odd use cases that just wouldn't be covered in standard page builders, that's all there as well. And the ability, to just make sites live, stage sites, and give clients access. The client editor area is like just mind-blowingly good in terms of its simplicity. My wife, who is a complete technophobe, she's not watching this, so I can talk about her. She won't mind me saying that she's a complete technophobe. I built a website for her in Webflow, and it took me less than 5 minutes to teach her how to update static page designs, how to update her various kinds of posts that had multiple different kinds of, custom fields and things like that. It's just obvious. I didn't have to hide things. I didn't have to reconfigure things. I didn't have to worry about that at all. One thing that you were talking about in terms of like profitability in business is the fact that a lot of people sell care plans as a recurring revenue to create recurring revenue, which is basically, well, let's rewind. Charging your clients, let's say you've taken on a project for a one-off fee, right? So it's a one-off project, but it makes absolute business sense to then continue to charge your client a recurring fee for ongoing services, right? So that I am completely behind. Yeah, any way that you can deliver value and return on investment for your client on an ongoing basis and charge them for it is absolutely fine by me, no problem. And I would recommend that as well. But one of the things that people do, of course, is sell a care plan to update plugins and fix problems caused by plugins. In fact, charging clients on an ongoing basis to fix and update the very platform that they recommended for them as the best solution in the first place seems a little bit odd to me. Seems a little bit off in some cases. I'm not saying that people do that on purpose, but it just seems like an odd little dynamic that's going on, an odd little business model I'm just going to just charge you, the client, forever, because you're going to have to pay me forever to keep this thing up to date and keep this site afloat. Beyond, this is beyond suggestions for improvements to the work, the flow of the site, suggestions for improving the site on a business level in terms of SEO and new content and new pages and new functionality and all that kind of thing. So all that is great. Now, people do rightly worry, what is going to happen to my care plan income if I start recommending to clients this other platform that doesn't break and doesn't need updating and doesn't need fixing in the first place? What am I going to do? Now, I talked about this in detail actually with my friend Kyle. I don't know if Kyle is still on the call, but Kyle was really helpful actually in helping me get my head around this as well, because it's something that people ask me quite a bit. So I just want to thank Kyle kind of publicly here because he was extremely helpful with this. But one thing that he said to me was, like, think the fact that, so the reason why somebody will pay a premium for Kinsta for their WordPress hosting, for example, is that it is fully managed, right? So you're paying an extra cost, but it is a fully managed hosting. They are just going to deal with it for you. They're going to keep things updated for you. They're going to manage any configuration, and you pay for that. So the results that you're paying for is hosting that you don't have to worry about. Okay. Now, you can extend that to thinking, not thinking about care plans, but just thinking about fully managed websites instead. So what is the result? Not the actual tasks of a care plan, not the actual steps, not the actual stuff you have to do with a care plan, because clients don't care what you actually do. All they're bothered about is the end result, right? What's the end result? The end result is a rock solid website that doesn't break and is there to accept
job.
visitors and do its job. Yeah, do its job, right? So the result, that is the result, people, that your client wants. If you can deliver that result by recommending a platform that happens to do all that for them, then you can charge the same amount for whatever the result of the care plan was for using Webflow instead. It doesn't matter the fact that you've had to do less work. In fact, it's better because you're more available to the client to help them with actual real value and, real return on investment. So
Yeah, I think you've kind of echoed the sentiment that I've had in the past, which I've talked about on different live streams, about the whole care and maintenance plan side of things, because of the choices that we make for the platform that we choose. And this again goes back to that whole sort of thing where you choose the right platform for the job for the client. The client is the person that you have to be doing the right job for and providing the right tools for. Imagine if you bought a car and every time you want to put petrol into it, you had to go and get someone else to do that for you and pay them 50 quid. You'd very quickly get fed up with that. And I think that's the same when it comes to maintenance plans. I think there's nothing wrong, and a couple of questions have popped up asking the same kind of thing. Maintenance plans, including like hosting fees, license fees, things that to keep that website running have to be paid for. I think that's an acceptable way of sort of working. And the same kind of thing goes, like you already mentioned, if you're updating content, adding new content, doing SEO tweaks, all those kinds of things, they improve the website's effectiveness. Those are things that I think are perfectly fine inside a care plan. But when you're literally charging people for the fact that updates may break, you have to do those updates on a weekly basis, or however you want to automate that with various different systems, all those things, but they're all based upon our choices to provide a solution for the client that they didn't ask for. So I kind of have this bit of a conflict of interest in thinking, I don't feel like we should pass that on to the client, because that's a decision that they handed over to us to choose the right platform for them, and now we're making them pay for that choice that we made. Do you kind of get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I do. It's the trade-off thing, isn't it? If it is genuinely a trade-off, so the conversation with the client in the first place about the client's requirements, the particular needs of their project, actually, WordPress would be far, far the better platform, right? So that's decided. One of the trade-offs that's explained to the client is what you're getting with access to all the multitude of plugins that we need to put together to get this job done, which is brilliant. We will need to be constantly updating those and charging you for it and fixing things if there are any conflicts. It's not that conflicts happen all the time, or even some of the time, but they do happen occasionally. So that to me is fine. There's nothing actually wrong with that, because it's kind of it's all out in the open, and it is a trade-off. It is an acceptable cost of the massive benefits that you get from using WordPress otherwise for that particular project. But I think if it's probably to just hammer the point maybe a little bit stronger, is that if you are only choosing WordPress because it gives you the ability to have ongoing recurring income because of the nature of the architecture and what needs to be done to maintain it, I think it's that feels particularly off to me. But also, really, if people feel that, well, how on earth am I going to kind of maintain any recurring income? How the hell am I going to constantly keep charging the client? As I've said, have no problem with charging a client on a recurring basis for retained services and help of any description. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's just and you can do it. There's nothing wrong with charging the client for a fully managed website where those things are all taken care of for them. Definitely.
I've done exactly the same thing. I've sold care plans to clients because they want to get on with running their business, but they want someone that when they need content updated, their terms and conditions, new pages added, whatever they kind of want done, they come to me for it. So they get a reduced rate. They pay me in advance for a block of my time over a set period. And then to me, that feels perfectly fine and perfectly normal, because they are paying you for a service that you're doing that they require. When it comes to just keeping the platform running because of the platform you chose, that's where I start to feel a little bit torn in my loyalties between, making money as a business and basically just forcing people to pay me because of the choice that I made. I keep going back to the choice that I made because, when someone comes to you as the web designer, they're coming to you for your skills, your knowledge, your expertise to drive them and push them in the right direction to give them what they need to get the job done. They don't necessarily understand the tools that are being employed. We do. So we have to make, I personally, I feel like we have to make the right decision for them, not just today, but ongoing, because otherwise that relationship can very quickly break down when a client feels like they're just being ripped off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is that thing of the I don't know, the solution that you're recommending for them. I was on. I don't know if Matt's still here, but Matt Medeiros left a. I saw he had a little comment right at the beginning of this. He might have disappeared by now, but
podcast. He just comes on to say podcast.
Oh, was that it? Just start a podcast.
Yeah,
I'm
pretty
off.
much. Yeah, he nags me to do a podcast.
Drop the mic. That's it. But yeah, well, he's probably not here, but I had a chat with Matt on his podcast last week or a couple of weeks ago, and there was a phrase that he used which I really like. I've heard it before, but it was just the way that he used it in context. But he said, "When WordPress is your hammer, everything looks like a nail."
Yeah, great.
And
great phrase.
that kind of really struck it home to me. Is that WordPress is the absolute best solution for all manner of different things. I think sometimes it's like the extremes. WordPress is absolutely brilliant if you want to create a really kind of simple blogging solution, although I would personally just use Webflow these days because it's just so much easier. But using it for its intended purpose, or possibly if you want to build something quite complex with lots of moving parts, and you're not necessarily a developer who can actually code that functionality yourself, but you're happy with the trade-off of all the moving parts, then I think that's fine. But I think there's a massive area in the middle that I started to feel like, certainly for me and certainly for a lot of the students that I work with, that WordPress is starting to feel like, it's this hammer that we're kind of using to batter every single nail, every single possible use case. When also, I think what this point goes to show is that it's not a case of either or. It's not a case of versus. It's not a case of some kind of pitched battle. Like you were saying about, people get very tribal. They have their kind of identity wrapped up in their web building platform of choice, which is frankly quite weird. But I see it and I kind of understand it. As humans, we have the need for a sense of belonging.
Yeah, we do.
In a tribe, and this is who I am. This is what I do. So I do understand that, but none of this chat and none of anything that we're talking about is really meant to be saying this is bad, this is good. In some kind of, I don't know, primitive match. Yeah. It's just a case of choosing the right tools for the job, I think.
It is. I think that's definitely the case. So we've got a couple of comments that I've sort of flagged up as we've been going along. So I'm going to kind of go through a couple of these now and put those out there. And we'll have a little chat about them. And some are more statements, some are sort of questions and things.
Yeah.
So to go back, to keep on the thread that we're kind of on at the moment, this is from Kyle. Does your client ever need to know what the website is built with? Most of the time they don't care and probably have no idea if it's WordPress. And I would totally agree with that. You don't need to tell your client. And I think that's not really, for me anyway, I can't put words in Dave's mouth. For me, that's not kind of where I'm coming from with my stance on the whole care and maintenance plans. It's more a case of that if WordPress is the right tool for the job, that's perfectly fine. It's just where some people can kind of hold the client ransom to the platform to keep on making money just to justify the time they have to spend maintaining that platform, which unfortunately WordPress and all the things that go with it, they do have, the more complex the site gets, it does have a very large amount of time required just to keep that thing running. And fine if you have 2 or 3 sites, but when you suddenly have 50 or 100 sites, as we know, when it comes to something like an Elementor update or a WooCommerce update or something that regularly breaks or has incompatibilities with third-party tools, not necessarily down to Elementor being the problem or WooCommerce being the problem, you know, it could be something else. But the reality is we are making the client pay us for the choice that we made to provide a solution to them. And unfortunately, WordPress that is an inherent issue with WordPress, is that time requirement to keep it running smoothly and avoid those problems that are just part of the platform.
One thing about Webflow that I like, I touched on it earlier about the client editing experience, but they don't actually, you send the client the link to be able to edit the site. They actually just visit their site. I think they do have to stick a little thing on the end of the URL, but once they do, they don't go into any back-end control panel. They don't go into any separate system. It's all on the front end. So if you've allowed it for any individual elements on static pages, they can click around the site as if it was the normal page. They can click on elements. They can edit the elements that you've allowed them to be able to edit. And then if they want to edit posts and add posts, or, you know, whatever they want to do in terms of their, let's call them like custom post types in WordPress, then there's just a little panel at the bottom which just slides up, and they can manage those directly there on the page itself. So taking that just one stage further, clients really do not need to know that the website is built in any platform at all in that case.
No, I agree. So hopefully, Kyle, that's kind of like addressed where we're kind of coming, or where I'm coming from, and you know, with my whole sort of stance on this kind of thing. Okay, we're going to have a little look, and we've got Simon. So this is Simon's comment. What if you don't need to charge a client for premium licenses because you recommend something that already has that built in? So, I mean, when it comes down to things like that, if you've got your licenses built in, then I wouldn't really worry about charging the client for it. But that isn't always the case with various different things. Like if you look at like Elementor, for example, you might have the multi-site license, so you can have it on 1,000 sites. Do you want to charge your client for that side of things? That's up to you how you want to sort of manage and maintain that side of things. For me, I would sort of charge the client, and I would generally tend to sort of pass the license renewals off to the client. I might manage it for them, but it'll always be in their name. But obviously that's not something you'd have to worry about when it comes to working with Webflow, because Webflow is a totally self-contained platform. So
yeah, I think what you would do in Webflow is just standardize the fee for the hosting, the rock solid result that we're talking about that always works, and that would be it. So yeah, you've got no need to build a client for anything else.
It's true. So we've got Wiki Designs in this evening, so hopefully they're still here. So good evening to Wiki Designs. Great to see how many tutorials you guys are putting out. It's great to see what you're doing. So the question is, have you found the monthly limitations with pages, monthly visits, and form submissions to be problematic if a website needs to scale past the enterprise plan?
Yeah, good question, actually, because there are limitations, which is one of the trade-offs I keep banging on about. There are limitations, and I haven't personally butted up against any of them, partly because I'm not building like websites at scale, okay, and I'm not building websites with massive amounts of visitors as well. Having said that, what a lot of people will look at the Webflow pricing page, which details everything that you get, and the Webflow pricing page is a bit confusing. But what you really need to know is what I said earlier, which is you have one account plan which allows you to build, and then for every site that you want to go live, you add a site plan to that site, which, by the way, which is not clear at all on Webflow's pricing page. Once you attach a site plan to any given project, it frees up a slot in your account plan. So if you've got an account plan which allows you 10, like say that's the quota that you've got for that particular, I think it's a light account plan, is 10 websites in any one time. Let's say you've filled all 10 slots with sites in development and just being staged. And then one of those sites, you buy a site plan because it's gone live, you want to point a live domain at it, that frees up that slot in your account plan for another site. So once the sites are live, you're freed up to add more and more of them anyway. So it's not clear on Webflow's pricing page. I'd like to offer to just rewrite that page for them, actually.
Make it a bit
I
clearer.
I have made a video, a little video, because it's only kind of private. I'm not sure I'll be able to share the link, but a little private video just explaining the pricing, because they make it sound really complicated. Anyway, back to Wiki Design's question. So one of the things that it says is that there is a limit of 100 static pages, right? So you look at that, if you're anything like me, you think, what? I mean, why on earth are you limiting me to a number of pages at all? You know, that just sounds crazy. And you start looking along the different plans. I think the 100 pages is when you've actually got a live site plan. So you've got a live site with a site plan on it. 100 static pages, and you think, that's all right. The next level up will have more. 100.
No, all 100.
That's all right. The next one will have more, even up to the enterprise, which is meant for sites with, I don't know, millions of visitors a day. You still only get 100 static pages. Now, Webflow say the reason for that limitation is because of keeping the editor and the back-end interface like really quick and snappy. Because if the back end is having to basically kind of like manage and load and everything more than 100 static pages, then the experience of you as the developer in Webflow kind of takes a bit of a hit, which is fine, all very kind of a noble aim, and you think, yeah, okay, but what if I want more than 100 pages? What I quickly discovered is that you will never go more than anywhere near 100 static pages if you're using Webflow properly. So what I mean by that is that in WordPress, it is like, well, it is in Webflow. It's a doddle to create a new page. I'll have a new page and another new page and another new page. And you can just keep adding pages like to your heart's content. And you might, within those pages, have like different templates assigned to them. So single page templates, and you might have multiple ones of those as well. I don't know, depends on the structure of the site. But so coming from WordPress, that is kind of like the model. With Webflow, you are going to be using the CMS for 90% of the time of your page requirements, but like page creation requirements. I can think of, there's maybe a few odd examples of static pages that you do need. So we're talking very unique, completely standalone pages that are nothing else. There's no point in putting them in the CMS because there's only one of them. You're not going to be creating multiple posts. And so, you know, the homepage, maybe
conditions and things like that.
Not even terms and conditions, because like, for instance, I've got on my site, like everybody probably, you know, I've got terms, disclaimer, cookies, privacy. I've got an affiliate policy. I don't know, umpteen different boring legal pages, which nobody reads, let alone me. They've all got exactly the same design, right? There's literally name of the page, you know, terms and conditions, block of text in a single column. It's probably the simplest possible template I can imagine. And so what I did was I thought, well, okay, so rather than creating 7 separate legal pages, which are all exactly the same, I could custom create a static standalone page for every single one of them. I could duplicate the next one to create the next one, duplicate to create the next. We've all been there. But what's far more efficient and quicker and easier for everybody into now and in future, when you later decide to change the design and you think, oh shit, I've got 7 pages to rebuild. Create a CMS collection called legal pages. Right, so that's like a custom post type. It might need custom fields like what? The title of the page, the body copy. I personally created like a little navigation at the top of the, you know, like a little horizontal nav. Yeah. So people could just click between them or go to terms. Like somebody was really bored. Somebody was really bored and couldn't get to sleep. You know, they just let them easily go through all these pages. Now, I actually wanted to have the ability to have the headline on the page itself to possibly be different from the label that was used for the nav. Okay. So I might want my headline to be terms and conditions, but I might want the nav label to say terms, because I've only got like a horizontal bit of space like this to put the nav. So I might create a custom field for the title, the body, the nav label, I don't know, meta descriptions, various things like that. And create one template, one single, well, Webflow doesn't distinguish between posts and pages. It's all posts. So, a single post template, job done. And I could create any number of those that I wanted. That goes for services, I don't know, like even landing pages, thank you pages, everything I've got in the CMS. Like literally everything, because it forces, one, it's just efficient, it's easier to maintain, it's easier to manage in future, but also it kind of encourages me to standardize as well, because a lot of the time I think we're quite lazy as developers and designers. Think, I'll just create a whole new page. It's easier than, trying to remember like what I did last time or whatever. But a lot of the time, if you actually think, no, most landing pages are going to have a fairly set structure and layout, So let's standardize it and put it into a template. And you can still do things, like, let's say you had a drop down when you're adding the landing page, which said, is this landing page 1 design? Is it a landing page 2 design? Okay. Is it a landing page? So you could just have your client the ability to say, I want this to be landing page 2 design, choose it in a drop down. That's all they need to do. No static pages, no duplicating anything. So actually getting anywhere near that 100-page limit, you would struggle. In terms of like monthly visits and bandwidth and stuff like that, again, I think unless you were building some crazy traffic websites, I think you'd struggle to break those limits, definitely.
But then that kind of goes back to, I mean, to go to the limits of, the monthly visits and things like that. That's no different to a hosting plan. Hosting plans might.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They'll brand it in the number of visits, the amount of bandwidth you get, those kinds of things, or various different ways of branding it. It's still the same thing. And to go to the limitations of the pages and things, maybe it's one of those things that with this, you have to shift the way that you perceive creating a website and the terminology that surrounds it, and stop looking at static items and start looking, when you get into any kind of dynamic web design, I think you just generally stop looking at things as being pages. You look at how can I make something really simple that I can repeat the process, so I can make a standardized layout and give flexibility of content inside there. So you can build within the confines, but you can still have limitations, but a consistency of design and look and feel. So maybe that's the way they were sort of trying to portray it, but they just don't do it in the most obvious fashion.
Yeah, when you're actually looking at the pricing page and you're thinking, I only have 100 pages, right? See ya. That this is not for me. When actually it's not a limitation at all. It is, but in reality, it's not a limitation at all. I found using Webflow any number of situations that I hit that I thought, oh dear, this doesn't work as I expected, and then realized, and I'm actually just using my WordPress mindset here. I'm coming from on how things work in WordPress, and then you actually see the Webflow way of doing it, and you think, that's actually loads better. I just wouldn't have even thought of that. Things like, just really quickly, just things like, like having multiple post templates that I was talking about for a given post type, like multiple variations of a blog post design. That was one of the very first challenges I had using Webflow. And when I saw that technically you only get one template for a CMS collection, so you only get one single post template, basically, I thought, well, this is it. This is the deal breaker. I've already hit it.
Hit the ceiling.
But that's just not the way that it works. What you do is you would just create, like, rather than creating completely separate templates and creating and managing them all separately, you create one, but any parts within that template, you create your own blocks, your own div blocks, your own sections. It's completely open-ended. You can just set conditions on those blocks to say, only show this bit if a custom field has a certain value or whatever. And so it actually, in the sense, it's actually better because everything, all of the content, the elements, the logic is actually included in one template rather than spread across multiple ones. So you can have one template which has got commonalities, so certain common aspects to the content and the design that are across all the views. But also you can just like certain bits, you can really work with. So yeah, I hate a lot of those things.
Yeah, it's going to be a case of, I think it's the same when you're learning any new system, whether you go from one page build like from Elementor to Oxygen or to Divi or something like that. The terminology that surrounds it is different. The way things are approached may have some similarities, but there's still enough differences to make it a learning curve. And I would say that Webflow is going to be exactly the same kind of thing. There's going to be a learning curve to understand the terminology, to rewire your brain from the way that you've been used to working with a tool like WordPress to move over to something like Webflow. So yeah, I mean, that's a good example of, the terminology that's being used and how that can cause confusion. But the reality is it's not a limitation. It's just rewiring what you're kind of used to dealing with.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay, so there's another question here. And this is from, where's it gone? I'm quote you somewhere. There we go, from Mike Fountain. Can you completely white label Webflow sites? So I'm assuming this is more a case of from the client's access to be able to add content as opposed to the actual front end site itself.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. I can't remember exactly which, because it might be a certain plan level. Let me just have a look. I won't go into it because it's not something that I've done. It's on the pro account plan. So, so the light account plan I was talking about, which is $24 a month if you pay monthly, is the one that probably most people will be happy to get away with. It would probably be more than you need. Allows you to develop up to 10 projects at once. That's just develop. Once they're hosted, takes them off. But you've got to go up to the pro plan, which is $35 a month if you pay for the year, or $42 if you bill a month. And that gives you the ability to white label as well. So add your own logo to the CMS and client billing payment forms, remove Webflow branding from form emails and staging sites. So it's just going to remove any mention of Webflow completely from anywhere. Although it's not really in your face anyway, but...
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, every web design business is going to have a cost of doing business. And, $35 a month, you're kind of thinking, well, okay, that gives you unlimited sites. It's probably geared more towards agencies than individuals. White label, it isn't something that a lot of people are that bothered about, but it is there as an option should you need it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to have one more question, and then I'm going to pass the floor over to Dave so he can talk a little bit about his course before we wrap up this live stream. So, brilliant. The last one is, so in what situation will Webflow or WordPress be the right choice in your opinion? So which would you say, let's take a look at a scenario of, your typical agency, someone comes along and says they want a website. At which point would you say WordPress is the one that I would use for that type of site, or Webflow is the kind of one I would use for that site?
Tricky.
Difficult question.
If it was something like, it just completely depends on the situation. If we had time, probably the thing to do would be just to throw me like scenarios. What about this? What about that? So, but just off the top of my head, certainly specialist requirements like these are all specialist requirements that I actually wouldn't use WordPress for either. Like, for instance, hosting an online course, hosting online an online course, an online kind of training experience. I would personally always use a third-party platform because I've just seen far too many people just struggle with the whole LMS plugin situation. But it's really tricky. I don't know. There are certain things like, for instance, if somebody came with I was saying before, like a really complex requirement, like an events website, when people needed to be able to do all kinds of things. It's really hard to say, but there are certain things that Webflow just doesn't have the functionality to do it. And you could probably cobble it together, but you'd be using third-party tools. You'd be hacking it together a bit with Zapier to connect them. So at that stage, I would probably say probably WordPress, which is bizarre because WordPress isn't built for that kind of site in the first place. It has a simple blogging architecture, database architecture.
Yeah.
It's not designed for that kind of thing anyway. But the fact is, with the right combination of plugins, you can put that solution together. So, but I do know that quite a lot of people will say to me, Webflow seems to be great for your sort of standard, simple brochure site, but nothing else. And I don't believe that, quite frankly. I think with the power of what you get and the power of the CMS specifically, there are so many things that you can achieve with Webflow. There are so few limitations in terms of what you can do. So yeah, it's without an actual scenario. If a client came to me and said, "Here's our business. This is what we want to achieve. These are our goals," then I could probably make a more kind of informed decision.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my immediate sort of thought would be if you're dealing with sites that are listing sites, job listing sites, real estate sites, and you are limited on budgets, you can't afford a developer to do this for you, which, that is a very real scenario for a lot of businesses, then I would say that's definitely a WordPress-based solution, because Webflow itself isn't really geared towards doing that type of website design. Not saying it couldn't do it, but it's not really intended to do it. Whereas for most other scenarios, I think there probably would be a case of, how much traffic is it going to get? How complex is it going to get? Is there specific features you may need that Webflow might not be the best at or not provide right now? But I think, like you say, you'd need to have a good idea of what the project entails to then make the decision for which platform would work better.
Yeah, yeah. And there are certain aspects of like real estate sites, for instance, or car dealership sites. Let's take those kind of fairly classic examples. Those sites often, when they get past a certain point of having a certain amount of traffic, require custom functionality anyway, right? Which you're going to struggle to find any combination of plugins that do that. So you can certainly find like real estate plugins which will just do, kind of handle the thing for you, or a combination of, for instance, Elementor and custom fields and various other plugins that allow you to have kind of conditional logic and sorting and filtering and everything else. But even with all of that, I still think, and I sound like I'm trying to push Webflow above everything else, and I'm really not, but I'm honestly not. But I do think that, especially when they introduce the membership functionality, meaning that visitors will be able to have accounts, will be able to log in, sign up for an account, log into an account, do certain things in their dashboard, that kind of thing. I think it's going to really open up the game, because like with a real estate site, you've got certain static pages, you've got listings which you need to like display in a certain way. You need to give people the ability to sort of filter things down and search, and even the user to be able to sort listings in a certain way. So up to that point, like Webflow is just like, yeah, perfect. There's no limitations at all. You can create the template, the design, the content. You can assign dynamic fields to literally anything you like. You can create any custom field layout that you like. So it's when you would get to things like giving them more custom functionality, like saving certain choices or doing some kind of like fancy comparison between houses, for instance. That's probably at the point where I would personally be starting to look to hire a separate developer anyway.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. But you can still, if you hired a separate developer, obviously not a WordPress developer, but just another developer who, was able to create custom code and custom JavaScript for you and things like that, and understood Webflow's API, which is fantastic, and is able to hook into the API to do what they need, then I think the sky's the limit. But you are looking to hire a developer at that point. But if you're at that point, you've got a client who, probably is paying you custom developer fees anyway. So
yeah, that's when you get into the big figures. Yeah, that's when you get into the big figures. And I would argue the point then that, once you kind of get into the more complex sites like that, WordPress wouldn't be the right solution for you there anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap things up there for the question side of things, and I'm going to hand the floor over to you, because apparently there's a certain person that might be in here tonight that may have a new course coming out to deal with, hang on, what is it?
Yeah.
Webflow? So
Web
if you, do you
what
know anything about that?
flow?
Yeah.
I'm just getting some details actually in my ear right now. Yeah.
Well, I'll pass the floor over
Yes.
to you, Dave.
Yes. All right then. I'll try not to make this too sales pitchy. Very quickly, I made my new course from WordPress to Webflow, effectively in the beginning to scratch my own itch, and solve my own problem because as I said at the beginning, if you were here and you're still here, I I made three attempts to get three serious attempts to get my head around Webflow. And partly that was because the entire mindset and workflow is very, very different to WordPress. So I kind of wished at the time I had somebody who could say to me, yeah, it's fine. This is how this thing works in WordPress. This is how you get that particular job done in Webflow. This is how you can migrate your current mindset and workflows and things like that. So that was the first thing. But I also, I mean, there is some amazing Webflow tutorials out there. Webflow themselves have Webflow University. Webflow University is just an absolute goldmine of brilliant tutorials, like amazing content. As a teacher myself, I absolutely love their videos and I learned a lot of stuff from watching them myself. They've put an awesome amount of effort and time and money and energy into those. And it speaks volumes about the company that they are prepared to do that, to invest so much in education. The problem is that, well, two problems. One, although it is education, it is also a marketing tool as well. So a lot of the videos, they go quite quickly. A lot of it is quite kind of flashy, kind of whiz bang. Let's drag stuff on the canvas. Let's show people just how quickly you can bang things together in Webflow, which is great. And when you're first starting, that is, that's great, and I'm all for that. But while the videos are brilliant at telling you which buttons to press, how the features work, all that sort of stuff, you could get yourself going, building websites really easily. The problem I found really quickly is that there's no system, there's no methodology, there's no workflow. And because Webflow is so open-ended, like you literally, you can do what you like. You can drag what you like, you can style it how you like, you can create classes how you like. Because of that open-endedness, you can equally create an enormous mess. Now, attempt number one I made with Webflow, I abandoned it because I just couldn't figure it out. And the second one was because of that very thing. So in other people's tutorials, random typography, random class names, random layout values, in terms of grids and margins and paddings and things like that. And I just thought this is not the way to build websites. This is not the way to build websites efficiently and predictably and quickly. And I, in the end, thought, right, well, I am going to use this tool because I think it's awesome. So I'm going to make my own methodology, my own system. And so that's what I did. So I created a whole series of classes that cover all kinds of your typical web design styling requirements, which cover a whole layer of different things, which we haven't got time to go into just now. But so I pre-built all those into the system straight away, which is just basically a Webflow project. Then typography. So again, you can use whatever typography you like in Webflow. So I spent probably 2 months creating a scalable typographical scale system, which just has all the typography built in for you, all the kind of relative font sizes, the way that they scale on mobile, the way that you can, it's typography for a lot of the built-in standard typography like paragraphs and headings and various other things, but then also a whole load of custom typography for basically everything you could possibly need. And it just works. It just looks good because I researched it to the to the hill. A layout system in there as well, which just is a system whereby You just follow some simple rules that I created, and your layouts and your padding and your spacing and everything just looks great. Like without having to think about it, without having to reinvent the wheel on every single project. So I decided I'm after a while, I did like a little quick live series of training late last year, which went down really well and kind of taught me even more about how people struggle to to use Webflow. And I decided in the end I wanted to share the framework that I made, but also teach people how to use it as well. So I made a course that is step by step. It is for complete beginners to Webflow. You don't have to have ever even seen Webflow. And it takes you through a case study project. So what we do is we rebuild and migrate an old WordPress and Elementor website and rebuild and migrate that to Webflow step by step. But unlike any other training out there, it's not a case of just here's how to use Webflow. Click this. This is this button. This is what this menu item does. No, every step is actually building to my framework, my system, my methodology. So by the end of it, you've just got a system which allows you to create websites really, really quickly. I used my framework myself the other day for creating like a load of like the sales page and loads of landing pages and other pages for this particular course opening. And I had the whole thing done in, I don't know, like 3 or 4 hours because everything was already done for me. The framework already covered it for me. So that's what the course is. Series of videos. Each video is less than 10 minutes long. It's really quick. Kyle will tell you he actually banged through the whole course in like a couple of days of massively intense intense work. He completed all because it's not just watch me kind of thing, although a lot of it is just watch me and I'll show you, but I also give you assignments and tasks and encourage you to extend what I've taught you into more kind of complex and challenging situations. So it's by the end of it, you really understand my framework, my system, the naming conventions. You don't have to worry about what to call classes, to be able to really confidently develop fully functional, really kind of dynamic, complex Webflow websites.
Awesome stuff. And if anybody's interested in finding out
end.
more, there's a link in the description of this video. So
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Dave, for being on the live stream tonight. It's been an absolute blast. Always good to find out a little bit more about what you're doing and how the course and everything is going. I'm sure everybody else has enjoyed it, even though Kyle has been a bit of a naughty boy this evening, and he's going to get hit with the ban hammer if he's not too careful. Okay, so I just like everyone to say thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you very much, Dave, for being part of this, and it's been
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure as always to do it.
Thank you very much.
It's always fun to get the live streams going again. So hopefully it won't be too long now before the next one is up and running. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you, Dave, for being involved. And any links that you need are in the description of this video. I'll see you very, very soon. And thank you very much for being part of tonight's live stream. Take care, everybody. And thank you very much, Dave.
Bye.